Welcome to the Monday Club, in association with Find Insurance NI, your local commercial broker. This week we discuss what the Aussie rules in American football offer GAA players and what threat they pose, and the power of personality. Does the GAA need to learn to sell itself more? Okay, I'm Neil Loughran and I am joined this week by Kenny Archer and Cahair. We are going to be talking about Australia, America, and everything in between. Maybe not. We'd be here all day if that was the case. But we'll start off with the AFL, I think, and obviously historic links between the GAA and Australia going back to the 80s, 70s possibly, but the obvious jumping off point for today is Kobe McDonald. Kenny, you were there yesterday, 14 minutes, I think, 1-4 in 14 minutes or thereabouts.
Yeah, maybe 17 or 18 minutes,
Okay.
you know. He was
so much
averaging
talk,
2 points an attempt before he, brought it down again with another point later on. But 1-4 from 4 shots. It was incredible. It really did feel like a I was there moment. You know, the roar he got coming onto the pitch from the Mayo support, they were 13 points up. And it was sort of similar to what Donegal do whenever Michael Murphy takes the pitch. And they were right, they've talked about this lad, but he was sensational. It just, every time he got the ball, he did something with it. The goal he scored was incredible. I think probably has gone viral already. So he's an incredible talent. And Mayo they reckon they will have him this year for the championship before he goes down under to St Kilda. And if they keep him fit and well, he's a real threat in what looks a good Mayo team.
And you can see by his profile, like he has everything that the AFL would be looking. He's big, he's strong, he's quick, and he's 18, I think, as well. So they've got, although they don't all necessarily look for the same things, Cahair, sure they don't. Whenever we kind of talk about the AFL scouting profile, like different clubs, it'll depend on what their financial situation is, what they're willing to invest. Like St Kilda have a permanent presence in Europe, to keep an eye on the likes of Kobe McDonald. But how do you feel, like what stage are we at with the Irish experiment, as it's called? Because it is one of these things that is a constant conversation. How do you feel that things stand at the minute?
It's probably moving slightly back round towards being a thing again. It hadn't kind of really been a thing since COVID. COVID forced the AFL clubs to step back in a lot of ways from a lot of the things they were doing, and one of the things was investment in kind of foreign players. Effectively, like it cost them anywhere up to $200,000 to sort of bring a player from Ireland before they start. That project over a couple of years of scouting and flying families over and all sorts of things. So that's a big investment for something you're maybe not that sure of. And then when COVID changed a lot for them, they looked at the things that they had to cut back on, and that was one of the things. So there probably hasn't been much, and so in the in between, we've had the like of there was a lot of talk around Owen Michael Home and player, and they went to the combine, but kind of what was happening was they were going to the combine and they were going in blind almost, and the teams were blind to them. Whereas in the past, back when Marty Clark was been saying and certain players were going over, the Aussies knew everything about them before they ever came on shore, and they were basically just taking a look at them in the flesh. Whereas they're almost popping up to the combine now as complete outsiders to take a chance. And then what you say about profiles, like it's just hoping you find a gap, and some team needs what you have, and so that's what happened a wee bit with Anton Tohal. Like they were looking for somebody of his height and his profile, and it just the door opened to him that it might have opened to it wouldn't have opened to him to other clubs. Other players wouldn't have got into the spot that
right time, right place, sort of
right
thing.
time, right place, absolutely. So there is that whole element of it. And so when they're going to the combine now, they're almost working a year ahead of themselves. I think the expectation is now when they go out there for those combines, it's like that's the first time anybody knows anything about them out there largely. And so they're out there, and if they impress, they'll stay on a radar, they'll stay on a list, and then they'll look at them again the following year. What do we need for roster for the following year, does that player fit? And that's nearly, as opposed to going out to the combine to get a contract and stay there. I think that isn't really happening. And, you know, the like of then Kobe McDonald is the exception, a bit like Callum Brown, a bit like, you know, there have been players who have been spotted in Ireland. Like Callum Brown was spotted in the All Ireland minor final in 2017, and it was just like, right, this is a physical specimen that, you know, we need to take a proper look at, and the pace that he had and the profile that he had, he looked tailor made for it, and he's done really well out there. So that's, there'll always be players who will catch the eye of the Australians here because of the links between the two countries, of the links between the two sports, the two sporting associations. There will always be at least the corner of an eye of the AFL on what the GAA is producing. It's not going to, same as, you know, they were terrified when Sean White and Jim Steins and those boys, and there, you know, it's not common to take over, but there will always be players, and I suppose the sad part for us is that sometimes it'll be our best, the very best that we have, and it'd be a real pity for Gaelic football if Kobe McDonald when he goes, but like for the lad himself, it's unbelievable opportunity to go there and play, but it's just we'd love to see him play our sport.
That's it. And some counties probably feel like harder done by when it comes to this than others. Like with Mayo in the past have already lost, like Pierce Hanley to AFL, Oisin Mullins out there at the minute. And he's an interesting case, probably shows the slight difference in terms of the approach there as well, because, well, there's obviously so much focus on the young guys that, you know, the whatever teams are doing well at minors and under 20s, well, you know, they'll be keeping an eye on them. But the likes of Geelong with Oisin Mullin are prepared to wait that bit longer. They want them to be more mature, like more physically ready to come in. You know, it's a balancing act, I suppose, from their perspective. But I don't know how much bearing that's going to have, you know, on what way their approach, like the Australian approach, is going to change over time, because we see at the minute there's possibly going to be a new club starting in 2028 in Tasmania. That'll take it to 19. 19 is not a nice round number, so again the talk is that there's going to be a 20th club then, Canberra possibly area, and then so you have that window then for international rookies. I think they're all allowed, isn't it, 2 Category B?
2 Category B, I think. Yeah.
But you know, that possibly opens the window for not just the guys at the bottom end of the age scale, but the maybe more mature. I know, like like obviously Owen McElhone was looked at, or Murdoch was looked at a couple of years ago, Shea O'Hare, Finbar Roddy. You know, so how do you know what way is there that you're saying it's becoming more of a thing, Cahair, but is there maybe a slight raising of the antenna now more, Kenny, when you see that possibly new clubs and stuff coming on the horizon?
Well, that's definitely going to offer increased opportunities, increased slots for Irish players. I think Cahair wrote a piece about it last year, and there's the definite sense or suggestion that the Tasmanian franchise, or whatever you call it, would be allowed more
Devils,
newcomers than and you know, overseas players than the normal limit, just to sort of help get them up and running. I don't know if it's an upside or a downside, but I know from my whiskey writing sideline that Tasmania's climate is quite similar to Ireland. So that could be a good thing for them in some ways to settle in, but it doesn't have the same appeal, you know, of the sunshine that you're expecting in Australia. But I mean, they're going to go out there for the opportunity to play professional sport, and especially, yeah, if you get more slots open, then there's less pressure. It's almost like dodgy phrase nowadays, but positive discrimination. You know, that the Irish lads might get more of a chance with that club, say, and then if there's another one in Canberra. So it's always good to have more openings. And even you mentioned, it's not just the younger ones, though it will be more so because it take a bit of time for them to acclimatise and settle in and learn the nuances of that sport. But you had Cathal McShane there in 2021 who were trying to do the mathematics, but he certainly would have been mid-20s. And there was obviously a deal in place for him to go out the Aussie rules. And then Tyrone did what often happens in counties, not just Tyrone do it. And, you know, he was sorted out with a job here and he stayed and he helped Tyrone win the All-Ireland. Obviously, they lost Conor McKenna, who came back again in 2021 and has gone out there again. So it's not just for young lads either. You know, there's still opportunities for lads maybe in their mid-20s to go out to Australia and make a career for themselves in professional sport.
And that's an interesting part of it that Kenny's touched on there, Cahair, because yes, there's times when counties are in a position to maybe facilitate these guys maybe stay in here and find positions, whatever it may be. But another part of the conversation has been compensation for a lot of it, and something that has been talked about in the pages of our paper. I think Mark O'Shea has written a column or two about it, because Kerry has been hit particularly hard at times as well. That's a difficult one, because we are still talking about something that, even just outside of a sporting perspective, is a huge, personal opportunity for people to go out, men and women, to go out and really, further themselves personally. So I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with the notion of compensation.
No, I'm not either, and I totally
But I do see
totally
it from the
understand.
other side as well.
Totally understand. And there's a lot of money and time put into the players on this side in terms of their athletic development, their football development, the coaching that goes into them, the skill. There's a lot put into these players, but at the bottom of it all, it's still, you do a lot of that because you just want the best for the fellas. That's largely why we do what we do. You just want the best for the people around you, and you want to help them develop. And nobody, to a certain extent, nobody gets paid for it. But generally, the people that help develop a player at the minor level don't get paid much, or very, very little at all, if anything. So, and I'd be really uncomfortable with the idea of compensation, just from the perspective of counties and clubs potentially then obstructing somebody's dream. A young player, I want to go to Australia, and club or county saying, well, we want 300 grand. If we don't get 300 grand, you're not going.
And then that same guy falls out of love with
absolutely. You end up losing them to
everything.
And I go back to the original point, what it costs already for the Australians to invest in the player. If you take 200,000 or 300,000 compensation on top of that, then that makes $500,000 for somebody that they have no idea, is this going to work or not, and what they're looking at the price it is at the minute. Is it worth it? Maybe, just about. It's worth taking the punt on a couple of them every so often. Is it worth it at $500,000? Probably not. That's the way they would think. So and look, maybe that is the way, in terms of, if you want to kill off fellas leaving for Australia. But is that what we want to do to the young players? Is that what we want to I do. I understand the frustration. Just when Conor Glass was in Australia, and the difference he's made to Derry since he came home, and Derry won trophies, and to Glen since he came home.
You saw Marty Clark, Conor McKenna, as you mentioned, two guys who came back, and
makes an enormous difference.
Down didn't win an All-Ireland,
but nearly did.
An enormous difference when they are there, and so it's really understandable. But it's also, I don't think we should ever be in the position of standing in the way of people getting an opportunity to go and earn good money to play professional sport in a country where the lifestyle is very different, can be very different to here, the climate's very different to here. It can be a brilliant country to be in, and I just would be uncomfortable with the idea of blocking fellas over negotiating over money.
Yeah. Can I just jump in? And there's another couple of aspects. We live in a world of legalities and litigation, and the GAA is still nominally an amateur sport. So unlike soccer, there are regulations in place with young lads, and my hometown, Dungannon United Youth, and they do great work there. And then there's lads that have gone over to clubs in England and Scotland, and there's compensation arrangements, and that goes the whole way down the soccer ladder, as it were. You can't have that in the GAA when it's still an amateur organisation. And the other aspect, Marty Clark was speaking to him recently, and he mentioned it and I wouldn't say Marty bridled because he's a very mild-mannered guy, but I spoke to him and he made the very interesting point. He said a load of people go out to Australia and the United States of America every year from Gaelic games, and then maybe go out and work and or play a bit of Gaelic out in the United States. But he said, people will go out there even and they'll get jobs and so on. He said, like, this was a job for him as well. This was a career development. Why should there really be some sort of stumbling block for the club that wanted to take him out to Australia, as Cahair said? Why should they have to pay any more? They're not paying that for an architect or a bricklayer or certainly not for a journalist anyway. But, it was an interesting point. People have careers and hopes and, they can go out and teach in different places of the world and they're being lost to their home club. They mightn't be the absolute top tier talent like Marty Clark was, but, there's still talented men and women, young people going out there and the clubs just have to deal with, and it's just the way of the world,
The two things get conflated a wee bit as well. So they're all going to Australia, but the percentage of people who are going to Australia to play professional Australian rules football as opposed to the fellas who are just going to Australia, like the Melbourne Sevens was live on Clubber at the weekend, and people were flabbergasted that we could watch the Melbourne Sevens and we couldn't watch Galway and Roscommon at the weekend, which was a bit. But you looked at even the poster and the promo and some of the players that were there, Conor Mack and Mark Bradley, those boys, so, but they're out there. That's their life. That's their own life experience. Like, and they've just gone to Australia, and there's definite attractions there. But so it's which is the right thing or which is the wrong thing. There's no way you're ever going to stop Irish fellas going to Australia. They're just like, for years, for generations, it was New York. Like, Irish people just gravitated towards America, and now in more recent years, certainly my generation down, it's Australia is where you go. And so, like, Dungiven would be the neighbouring club to me at home, and they had a photo this morning, like, of 12 of them out for dinner in Australia, and all footballers, like 10 of them were playing senior football up until they left. And for one club, that's a massive hit, but what can you do about it? Like, if there's not prosperity and there's not jobs and there's not weather at home, people are going to leave Ireland, and that's just something where we've always been a country that sends people around the world.
But I suppose, you pose that question there, and maybe rhetorically, what can you do about it? But what can be done, I mentioned Cathal McShane. So jobs can be found for the top talents, and you go back again, refer to my own county, Tyrone, and nearly like the power screen days, when in Shea McKeown, and there was a lot of money about, and throughout Ireland as well, people got top players, hurlers, footballers, got jobs as sales reps, and that kept them in their county, kept them at their club, and so on. And we know fellas and girls now as well, you're more likely to get a teaching job if you're a high profile Gaelic player, footballer, hurler, camogue, lady footballer. It does help, with that coaching knowledge. Down when Marty Clark came back, he was found a sort of coaching role, I think. Benny Coulter, brilliant footballer, talent. Australia, I think, looked at Benny, and Benny got coaching roles within Down.
Got him off the site. Got him off.
Yeah. But, and that's sensible as well. The GAA for a long time has been quasi-amateur. We know, there's money washing about within it. There's people who love to see their county doing well. We'll look at the money that was pumped into Limerick hurling by JP McManus in recent years. And there's always people who will contribute. Some of that came back from America back in the day.
It the extended GAA.
Yeah, indeed. But it's just, again, it's the reality, and people love to help out their home county, and things can be done, and people be persuaded to stay. Again, with Tyrone, Sean Kavanagh, was very much sought after for Aussie rules. Big Sean obviously went down the accountancy road. He had the family link there, and that's a good profession to be in. But there are things done, and people can be helped to stay in the country and in their county, and that's what can be done.
It's important as well to put it in context that for every Marty Clark and every Conor McKenna, there's a lot who, you know, never play a game when, you know, they go out there. There's 40% or something that, you know, who maybe don't play at all and are back within maybe a year or two. Maybe the better for just having had that experience of, you know, being in a professional sporting environment. You know, obviously, like Kevin Dias, for example, went out and was hit by injuries and so forth, and just those things can happen. But I think some of the way we frame the conversation sometimes as if, you know, as if, oh look, we're losing all our best players and you know, they're gone and that's it. Now people will say, like Marty Clark, just to go back to him again, you know, like Marty Clark I think played something like 40 games for Down, which is mad, you know, when you think, you know, for a guy who you know was on Laker Gale a few weeks ago, Cahair. He wasn't the only one, but you know, he's kind of got that status, but yet played fewer games than guys you probably never heard of, you know. So
yeah, I look, and obviously Marty's the health issues, the Addison's sort of curtailed his career in either sport and at either end, so that didn't help. But no, you're right. Like the vast majority that go out don't play much significant football, if any at all. You know, they do end up coming home, and I think that has dawned a wee bit too on the players who are being asked, you know,
the risk. Do you mean the?
Well, look, it's risk in one sense. It's more like, is it worth it? Like because I want to play football for Derry or Tyrone or Kerry or whoever it is or Mayo, and I'm going out there to give up 2 or 3 years of my playing career to maybe not play anything. Now, I might, you know, you're talking in the range of $100,000 salary. Australian dollar salary for those couple of years when they're out there, like, which is what, £70,000. You know, it's decent. Now, don't get me wrong, it's good money. We love it, wouldn't we, lads? But
teachers probably get that.
But is it the kind of money that makes you go, look, I'll drop everything for 3 years and go out and just live that for 3 years? It's not, because you have to live then out there, and there's a lot of cost comes out of that. So all that, you know, it's not as appealing maybe as it was, in the sense of the way go back to the way the Australians have kind of eased off the pedal. So even the combine events that are held here, you know, they're kind of rushed at short notice, and fellas are being asked if they want to go at a couple of days' notice and different things, as opposed to in the past where it was a big deal. The best of the best were there, and it was organised, and it was, everybody wanted to be there and really keen. Now it's more a case of, you know, a lot of the players are who go and end up going to the combine in Australia are the players who are really interested off their own bat. They have nearly pursued it themselves, as opposed to being pursued. So, you know, how much of a factor in anybody's head is it? There's very, very few Kobe McDonalds. Like there are almost none. And will he go out and play much football? We don't have
so
a clue.
Many variables.
We don't have a clue. Like, you know, so many players go out there, they stay 2 or 3 years, they don't get in. The injuries, adapting to the training, adapting to the ball, adapting to the weather, adapting to the loneliness. You know, I know Dara Joyce out there would have really driven, trying to pull together the Irish players in some sort of a social group, which there was a stage when there was a lot of them out there, and then it dwindled, and they didn't really have a group as such. And like, a lot of them have talked about homesickness and loneliness, and, you know, it's not your culture as such. And like, just the Irish, like, I'm sure we're famous for going halfway around the world to find an Irish bar.
Well, Conor, that was one of the big reasons for Conor McKenna. You know, he struggled with homesickness a lot when he went out there, but like, I remember prior to the 2021 All Ireland, speaking to the family that he had stayed, like, he not that he stayed with, but he was basically never out of their house. The cores from Tyrone, you know what I mean? Like, and they basically took him in, and he became an extended member of the, and even then,
and that was so
even
important.
Then he found it hard, you know. But that
and
just
those
shows
records they made as well, whereas some had stuff.
That was probably the only thing that kept him there. Do you know, like, if that family hadn't been there, he would have been home. He probably would have been home. Like, we're not putting words in his mouth, but he's pretty much said that himself.
Yeah.
And there's just not that. Do you know, people struggle. Like I'm not saying, like, I lived out there for 6 months, and there was a lot of Irish out there at that time. It was the end of 2011 in Perth, and there was loads of Irish, but it's not home.
And you told us like you didn't stop crying for the first fortnight, was it? Or
2 months, yeah, 2 months.
there are positives to it though as well. You know, you look at what Conor McKenna brought to Tyrone, just so you have that, just the fitness levels from being a professional athlete. But I don't know my facts on this one of how much at all that Chrissy McCaig played when he was out there. But there you know the professionalism that Chrissy McCaig brought back and the standards in training and expectations and so on. And you got similar with Conor Glass. I mean, obviously both of them were top level footballers, but they just raise expectations and standards in training and go, you know, this is how you live your life outside the football pitch, you know, diet and, you know, recuperation and all that. So there is that aspect. Yeah, I mean, you can lose a guy for a few years, but if you get them back again, like Derry would love to have Callum Brown back, you know, but you lose a few, but the ones that come back really do raise the levels in general. You know, you saw it, Kerry saw it back where my brain's going, Tag Kennelly, you know, going back 15 years or so ago. Even there, just
20, Kenny, you're or must be no, maybe you're right, maybe you are
around
closer,
2009,
somewhere in between. Yeah, okay.
And more recently, Dingle winning the All Ireland Club Senior with Mark O'Connor.
Yeah,
you know, and a side aspect of that, why and Marty Clark, even though he was at Collingwood, really praised Geelong for how they dealt with that situation and their sensitivity and knowing how much it meant to Mark O'Connor to be able to play with his club. And there wasn't even necessarily the feeling that, you know, the thought, well, he might win Kerry, and then it goes on and to win Munster and then to win the All Ireland. And they were back in training, I think, and so on. And not only let Mark O'Connor play for Dingle and win the All Ireland, but some of his clubmates flew over from Australia to watch him in Croke Park that day. So there's that real
and allowed Oisin Mullen to take part in the training camp and Mayo's training camp in Portugal as well. Like Geelong are definitely clued in. You know, they're you know, and that, if Irish players are looking, that's attractive to them. You know, like if
there's that flexibility.
Yeah, and there's definitely, you know, even Callum Brown, like, came on for Limavady in the club championship when he came home. He came on against Fort Glen the last 10 or 12 minutes or 20 minutes that day as well. So there's definitely there would have been a wrestle with that, and now there's a wee bit more acceptance of what it means for those fellas. And if they ask, it's kind of like, we don't want to say no because we don't want to lose them. And you know, the goodwill. What did they gain out of letting Mark O'Connor play as opposed to what they lost? They gained so much and they lost nothing. So, you know, it's that wee bit of understanding, and you're taking the risk of injury. But as a man says, you could walk in front of a bus anytime. You know, that you could get injured walking down the street. You could trip over a curb, and so
it's probably indicative of how big the world has got with social media and stuff as well, because back when guys did go over to Australia previously, they probably were coming back and playing for their clubs safe in the knowledge that their clubs would never find out. Do you know what I mean? Like, or that there was a chance that they could go and play, whereas now all that has to be, you know, they have to be officially cleared to do all that now, and to get that permission, essentially, you know.
Social media is too big now. Like,
it is, yeah.
You can't hide those things. You can't even get away with playing a wee sneaky game of soccer at the weekend anymore. Like, for your local team, for the next thing you're in the local paper with your head stuck in it, and you scored a hat trick.
Peter Withnell and Pete McGrath flashbacks
here.
He's
back to Peter Withnell again. You want to back to me, or you don't get it? Want to back to me for Peter Withnell?
I don't like to talk about it.
Great read.
That brings us into, I suppose, obviously we're going to talk about the American football side of things, the NFL, and it ties in a lot of similarities, I suppose, and I wonder sometimes about, as I mentioned earlier, how we frame these conversations a bit, because I was going to say the new threat, you know, because it kind of rolls off the tongue, and yet I raised it with Niall Morgan down at a GPA thing last Thursday about the number of GA players who are on the now involved with colleges in America, doing really well out there, like Jack Cassidy, Loughran Quinn, who is now Morgan's number 2 in Tyrone in 2021 All Ireland.
4th All Ireland.
And he was like, he was sort of like, yeah, but I mean, those are success stories you want to hear, you know, like, whereas maybe sometimes we are inclined to get bogged down in the nitty gritty. But we'll talk about that first before we kind of look into what impact it has had. But are we guilty a wee bit of
going straight to threat?
I mean, we know, like, there's far more fellas and now increasingly young women as well going to soccer, because there's an easier route into not easier, but a closer to home route into professional career in sport. You're getting, you know, obviously they can go over to England or Scotland, or even decent money here on the island of Ireland. So you have rugby as well, you know, with 30 plus years of professionalism in rugby, open official professionalism in rugby. And, you know, again, there's a lot of battles to make yourself a professional footballer or a professional rugby player. But the upside of that is you're not very far from home. So that has its appeal. And I repeat, like, there's greater numbers there in both those codes than either American football or Australian rules football. So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, that grabs the attention. You get Conor Bradley at Liverpool is obviously high level and gets a lot of coverage, but you know, a lot of the players are down at maybe lower levels. But when you've got Charlie Smyth going and playing in the NFL in the USA, that is, you know, huge level of exposure, etc. And the same when you get guys playing, you know, and getting maybe to a grand final down in Australia, it gets big attention, you know. So, but it gets over exaggerated.
It does. That's what I mean. Like, but that when you see something like that, like whenever the guys down under reach it, you know, make it to a grand final or whatever, as you said, Charlie Smyth. Like, how many of us watched Charlie Smyth, you know, make his debut for the Saints and stuff? You know, like, there is a huge pride there as well. It's slightly conflicted, isn't it? A wee bit, because there is a huge pride, but there is definitely part of you that, you know, I remember talking to guys from Mayor Bridge and all going, aye, you know, it is great. You know, everybody's delighted for him, but there is a part of them would, you know, obviously love to have him.
Absolutely, you'd love to have them, but you're delighted for them. You know, you're not delighted for yourself and what's left behind as such, because you'd rather have them there. But, like, you know, the numbers of, you know, you go through, well, pretty much every county in Ireland, and the players who would be the best inter-county players in any county, how many of them end up not playing GAA? The numbers are fractional, like, you know, very few. Like, now, but you know, some the best ones, because that's, you know, if you're going to play professional soccer, you're going to play NFL, you're going to play AFL, you're the best, you are at that level, and so you're, no matter what you do, you're going to have trouble holding on to the best players in an amateur game when their alternatives are professional. And that no matter what the GA does, no matter how it tries to, you know, cut ties or make life difficult, it's going to be difficult to hold on to those very, very best players. And sometimes it's a profile thing and whatever, maybe suited to certain sports. And like you mentioned Niall Morgan, like with the NFL thing, it is very much goalkeepers at the minute that are sort of, well, I say at the minute, probably that'll be it. You know, I don't see
Jack Cassidy, the likes of Jack Cassidy, I suppose. Like,
yeah, they're kickers. Like, that's Jack Cassidy. Like, Jack Cassidy did brilliant last year, moved on, and the coach that had him loved him and wanted a replacement, and his replacement was Carol Campbell from 12 mile down the road in Marfeld. And like, go back to opportunity, you mentioned Loughran Quinn there. Like, Loughran Quinn was sitting on the bench for Tyrone wondering, well, you know, will I go and do a scholarship in America and get a bit of money and play American football in front of 100,000 people, or will I sit on the bench for Tyrone? And sub goalkeepers are particularly ripe for this because they're big kickers. And like Carol Campbell was a prime example, who was behind Owen Lynch in the club, and then obviously Shea McGuckin ended up coming out of that situation because Carol Campbell opted out of nearly playing for Marfeld last year in the club championship. He said, look, I want to go to the NFL, I want to go and play American football, and he put on 15 kilos in the gym, like, and made himself into a monster and a massive big leg on him, and so that will always attract certain, and when goalkeepers, when young players see the opportunities that are there, like, all you really have to be, it sounds simple, like, but all you really have to be able to do is kick the ball accurately 80 yards repeatedly, that you're really, really good at, and that's your only job. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to run. If you couldn't run out of your own road, it doesn't matter. As long as you can kick the ball 80 metres.
Can you clarify for me there just about him? Is that one big leg like Popeye's one big arm, or did
Pretty
he
much.
balance
I
it
presume
out?
he did. He wasn't just doing single leg squats, like, he was a wee bit of both. But look, the NFL again, it's a brand new, you say, threat, and it is a threat in some ways, and it's an opportunity for the players themselves. On the other side of it, it is pretty new. It is probably going to get bigger. Like, that leader kicking crowd that are running a lot of this are I think 2,000 replies to their online forum. They're getting 10 direct messages a day. They have a training group at the minute of 23 or 24 fellas that train twice a week for this, and their pathway is into college football. Charlie Smyth was nearly a 1 in a million in terms of his pathway. That will not open up automatically for very many people. Like, they're going to go the college route. But the 17 college kickers there at the minute, and they're looking at Australia providing around about 60% of the kickers in college football in America. So the Irish market is saying, well, why can we not? Because probably a lot of those Australian are coming from rugby backgrounds, union and league, or are coming from a background of kicking and particularly goalkeeping. The vast majority of interest comes from goalkeepers. There's a fella, I have great hopes for a fella, Peter McStravick from Louth, like, who just has a massive kick on him, and they just see him heading over and maybe doing really, really well in the next couple. Sorry, I hit the mic again. It's a couple of weeks since I did that. They see him doing really, really well, and there's probably going to be more and more. And look, it just threatens. It's interesting. It threatens goalkeeping resources at a time when Niall Morgan was saying to you last week, goalkeeping has become very boring again.
Yeah.
So
what I was gonna
that
ask
is
about.
part of the dynamic. Like,
That's, I suppose that's a.
As opposed to people just being boring about goalkeeping. Which,
excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is, because again, he and it's an unintended consequence, I guess, but he was obviously reveling in the glory days of him and Rory Began,
That Ulster
flying
final.
past each other. That was it,
That was class crack.
Yeah.
that
It
day.
was class crack, but there was also at the time watching it, you're kind of going, this is.
Oh,
Don't think this is too much. Like, it is a bit mad, but I don't know. I
was
remember you.
I was a nervous wreck watching that, shouting at Morgan, "Get back in here and
Yeah,
goal!" You know.
totally. But like, I remember you texting me maybe last year, a couple of years ago, saying like you'd done 10K or something in a match.
I
or
did,
something.
we played some, and even in the new rules, I did 5.5 kilometers doing
Yeah.
that last week. Like, and one of the championship games on the old rules would have been maybe 7.5 kilometers. Like, and I might not touch the bloody ball. Like, I don't even know what I did running around 7.5 kilometers.
Back in the 2000s, you wouldn't have done that in a year. And
Absolutely. Like, so look, the dynamic of goalkeeping changed massively from probably 2018, 2019 to 2024. It became a very, very different role.
And it's changed back.
And it's changed back again now. And it's like we're seeing the benefit of shot stoppers. Gavin Mulroney struggled a wee bit on his kickouts yesterday, but his shot stopping was very good. Shane Murphy's shot stopping is brilliant. Ronan Burns' shot stopping. Now Morgan, obviously, his shot stopping was always one of his strengths. So we're seeing a wee bit of a tip back towards that. But it's a different role. You're not involved in open play, and in order to go and get involved, you're telling an outfield player to go and stay back, which you don't really want to do. So there is an element of is the game then attractive to goalkeepers, and does that make the NFL route even more attractive in the sense of, well, this game's a bit boring for me.
I wonder as well, from the other side of it, like from the American side looking in, like, first of all, I love the notion that like Irish people are like genetically predisposed. Now, a bit like Kenyans with running, like as if it's a gene pool issue now. Like, we're just brilliant at kicking, you know what I mean? And America's now looking at it going, we're going to take advantage of this, But from them looking in and seeing I mean, it's very easy to get caught up in the Charlie Smyth factor, and we saw with June McAtomney just how quickly that can all stop anyway. You know what I mean? So, but knowing how much of it, I suppose, is geared towards the marketing aspect of it, the sale, and what that could potentially bring. Obviously, we saw the NFL had its first open season game. Is that the right term, Kenny?
You were the NFL expert for those 2 weeks.
I'm more that.
Found myself wild out of my depth there. Trying
I
to
changed more to be the expert on criticising the NFL.
I was going to say something about a running back there earlier, and I wasn't sure if that's even a thing. Or is that a film about a Jamaican bobsleigh team?
But yeah, there was a game obviously in Croke Park there a few months back. You know, will clubs, huge entities that they are, but will they be looking at that market now that Charlie Smyth is maybe creating and go, geez, you know, is that oversimplifying it for them?
Well, I mean, they definitely, they have a look there at Irish talent, but just even on the appeal and the opportunity, like it's worth noting college football, college American football is just crazy because I checked there about Loughran Quinn and he was at a place in West Virginia. I had even Googled it to see where it was, Marshall University, and he made his debut in Georgia nearby in front of 93,000.
Massive.
Like the crowds to get at college football are crazy. There's a huge amount of money in there. Now he's obviously not a professional, but as Cahair said, that's more likely to be the pathway rather than Charlie Smyth just rocketing straight into the NFL.
So how does it work for them? Yeah, obviously they're not going in on huge, like Charlie Smith's on around the $1 million mark now, you know, as part of the playing squad. But from the university end of it, scholarships.
Yeah, the scholarships are the thing because many decades ago when I went to university, you had your fees paid and grants and all that. Sending kids to university nowadays is very costly, and even
particularly in America,
the UK, they're having that big issue about student loans. The interest rates making even more problematic for people. You're building up massive debts. American universities are costly, but if you get there on a scholarship, that will really help out. You won't have those costs. Then you're in the States, and even with a current administration's approach, you may well then be able to stay and work and make a career.
You can say his name, Kenny. You're not getting in anyway.
No chance whether or not Northern Ireland
the Donald
fluke their way through to it. Sorry, win their way remarkably through to the World Cup. But
did Paul not tell you I'm going?
Some chance. But I need to turn my page here and find out, because again, actually I was looking at Irish connections, and there's a fella, Daniel Whelan,
yes,
from Wicklow, who is at the Green Bay Packers, and he moved to the USA when he was 13. So last September, he signed 2-year, $7 million contract extension with the Packers. He's a punter.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that's a specialist position, obviously, but there's just huge money in there. So I almost forget what your question was, but I'm just so dazzled by these figures of attendances in college football.
I suppose, yeah,
and the pathway
and the
money
what's on
that's
offer for those guys going over is
and the punters and the kickoffs is what really brings them across. Like that's what they're looking at here, because we don't have the setup for the you don't have the team in front of you to set up field goals. You're kind of going over there in a whim, so you're set up on punting and kickoffs first initially before they go over there. And their scholarships are fully paid, accommodation, food, all their costs are covered. Everything's covered under the scholarships, like so. And obviously they get their degree at the end of it. Now there'll be fellas there as well. There's that side of it as well. Like it takes fellas down, even if it doesn't work out in the football side, maybe it takes them down a totally different career path that fellas mightn't have been able to afford or mightn't have thought of, or so it's a great opportunity in that sense. And again, that's back to the individual and not wanting to stand in somebody's way in terms of, just like imagine that was you or your own child was offered that opportunity. You wouldn't want somebody to say, well, no, you can't go because we want 200 grand for you because we built you into the footballer that you are and we're the reason you're going. And I just I go back to being deeply uncomfortable with that idea. I don't think it would help the thing at all.
I'm just going to have to veer off here, even though Cahair has about 70 pages of notes. I only have about 3. But because I did some research...
69 of these are blank, Ken. It just looks good.
This was fascinating to me. So, Irish guys who were in the NFL, there was a guy called Adrian Young from Dublin who was out and he was a brilliant player. He was a linebacker, not a kicker.
Okay.
And he was at the University of Southern California in a team that included a certain O.J. Simpson.
Oh,
and then
whatever became of him.
Yeah, I don't know. And then the next guy, also from Dublin, from the Round Towers Club, club of Jim Gavin and Alan Milton, Neil O'Donoghue. Now, he was a kicker. He went to Buffalo Bills and played alongside O.J. Simpson. So, yeah, crazy. I don't think glamour is the word anymore, but it's back to that thing about the NFL. It is just box office.
And were they both as innocent as OJ?
No comment.
We've come a long way since Ronan O'Gara as well, lads. Like, I don't know if you know the story of whenever he was competing with David Humphreys for the number 10 position. Humphreys had got an improved deal with the RFU through for interest from abroad, basically. Miami Dolphins representatives were spotted in Cork or something like that, and O'Gara basically used that to his advantage to swirl it around that there was conversations, and whenever he was asked about it, he was like, who knows, we'll just see where it goes. Like, and obviously there was no contact at any stage or whatever, but he got his deal, and he's you have to make it pay, don't you?
He didn't come up the foil in a bubble. He didn't.
Right, so we're going to have a wee talk about the issue of visibility in the GAA profile, because part of the GPA's new playbook is aimed towards improving the visibility of players.
Did they take that from the NFL?
Are we back here already? Improving visibility, basically, because there's probably always been this slight say nothing trait associated with GAA, particularly from GAA inter-county managers and stuff. Whatever you do, say nothing. So
tell them nothing.
They're trying to change that. And Cahair, it's timely. The weekend that came after that, then we saw Kieran McGeeney and Jim McGuinness both speaking after yesterday's game in Armagh. Both very good in their own rights, as you wrote in the paper today. That they just can't be uninteresting. No matter McGeeney.
Try not to be.
McGeeney was kind of half pleading to not be quoted, but also half loving it as well. I think there is a showman in McGeeney that enjoys.
He is her Roy Keane.
That platform.
He is her Roy Keane. He in terms of, I think, even nearly being misrepresented and misunderstood for a long time. People saw this I don't know, maybe it was just those post-match interviews on RTE where that kind of more stilted format and I've never really felt that from him. I've never felt that he was never felt that he was that way.
Cahair is a smart, educated guy. He's funny. Like, his dad was Bard of Armagh. His dad's a very witty man.
Didn't like it off the stone.
No. So, he has that. He has that intelligence. Like, even there, funnily enough, last week, and people going on about almost, him using this word piggery as if it was something he made up. But he just knew that the term and what it represented. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's always interesting. He's always
good comic timing, good. He's funny, and we've had this conversation around, it's our job. The written word comes across or can come across very differently, no matter nearly what we do with it, no matter what way it's done. People can read it in a million different ways, and so it can come across very different. Whereas these huddles now basically being videoed and sort of disseminated, and there is no then context. You kind of just get the unvarnished, here it is, here's what he said, and it's nearly sometimes what he said is not reflected in how he said it.
I think that's what annoyed him for years.
Yes.
And he was drawn on that yesterday, saying as if to make it clear that readers understood that it wasn't managers kind of gathering everybody around to say.
Yeah. And I wasn't even asking. The funny thing was, I wasn't even asking him about the referee, because what I was going to ask him was he decided with 90 seconds to go to bring Tomas McCormick on at a kick out, and it just, because he brought him on at a kick out, it stopped the clock. Whereas if he'd let the kick out run the clock wouldn't have stopped and they might have lost 20 or 30 seconds and they were chasing a 4-point lead. And I just thought, was it something they had thought about because they got frustrated in Roscommon last week? But mid-question, he was just like, I'm not talking about referees. And he was off on one. Like, but you talk about personality. Like, it's so important that people get to see that and experience that side of it too. Like, and that, that I suppose managers have to come out in some way. Most managers come out.
Yeah, just on the power of personality. Like, you would love to have heard from like Davy Fitz yesterday, for example, after the Antrim game, because like him or loathe him or whatever your feelings on Davy, but he is one of the guys that people are drawn to, you know what I mean, when they talk. And it is something possibly the GAA has been lost for at times. I think that's the issue. I think that's what the GPA are looking at here, that maybe they're seeing the way that other sports are marketing themselves and marketing the people who play their games or participate their games, and seeing a deficit in terms of how they're doing it, how the GA is doing it.
I suppose the players are always going to be, in every sport, they're kind of reticent. Like, you don't see professional soccer players, you see them interviewed, you don't see them do anything interesting. Like, you listen to a pre-match interview on Sky and like, what do they say? They don't say that much different to what our fellas would say in a pre-match interview. And
no, definitely not. But you would, like in the soccer, you get the interesting ones where there's a pre-arranged sit down for like Football Focus, or where they'll do a sit down interview for say the Saturday papers or the Sunday papers, and you would get more interesting stuff out of that.
Occasionally you do, but occasionally we get them as well.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing about it. Like, and what we've always found is that what people are really driven by and interested in terms of GA is personalities and people's stories, not necessarily the games themselves. Like, the best things that you will read or listen to are people talking about nearly everything except the game that they play, because players are scared of talking about the game that they play.
That was one of the things that came up last week. Niall Morgan touched on that, said, that's why we joked whenever he sat down with us, we went, right, so tell us about Louth. It's just...
But like we've all learnt over the years, the fellas that are comfortable with speaking to the media, and then it becomes this, continuing circle of the same number of maybe half a dozen players, hopefully from one county, the ones that would get interviewed, and people are going, why are you always interviewing them? But there's some guys who just aren't comfortable with talking, and you don't then really approach them even after a match either,
And that becomes a bad cycle for everybody. When you get players who are so comfortable doing it, we gravitate towards them, and then they become, within their own group and on the outside, they become, there he is, stuck in the paper again this week, and so that doesn't help players, and they don't want that tag, and so that becomes a sort of a vicious cycle of, nearly, if you're good at it, you get asked to do it, then you're stuck in the paper again, and it's like you don't necessarily want to be in the paper every week or every other day. So there's a wee bit of it's hard, because you're right, there's fellas that are uncomfortable doing it. There's also a lot of fellas who would be more comfortable doing it and don't do it for various reasons, whether they don't want to be out there or the manager or the setup doesn't want them to be out there. And that's
sometimes the manager doesn't trust
absolutely
so
to be born and to be and that's the thing. You go back to McGuinness and McGeeney, like they're at the head of the ship. In some ways they can afford to be more interesting, if you like. Like, whereas the players have the weight of the judgment of the rest of the group on them. If they say anything, it's like you say something stupid, you get beat at the weekend, and that was his fault for saying that. Like, he railed them up, and players don't want that. So,
but we absolutely know that some players, when they come out to us post match, they've been instructed by the manager a certain line to say or what not to say. And I would safely say yesterday what Jim and Geezer were talking about was nearly right. What we won't complain about here, let's not give them lines, No,
in fairness, it's funny, like, because Jim said, I think what we're talking about, and it was, I'd be pretty sure it was the referee. It was,
well, that's what I mean. No, there's part of it, like, right, we're not gonna though
Yeah.
come out here and be hostages to fortune and to headlines and give out about them, you know.
Aye, but they both had their own complaints with the referee. Like at times Donegal were raging, at times Armagh were raging. Like and in fairness, now I felt that maybe Armagh got the wee bit of the raw deal just in terms of like Oisin Connolly had a shot from 25 yards when the referee had given him an advantage, and then when Oisin Connolly took the shot, he took the advantage away and didn't give the free, and Armagh went a bit. We think just a couple of those probably went a wee bit against Armagh more than Donegal, but there were decisions that went the other way. And look, Brenton Colley's for me maybe the best referee in the country at the minute, and I didn't think Sunday was his best day, but he wasn't horrendously bad or anything close to it either. So it's a tough job, and look, it was just great to get a wee bit of character. It was just great to get a wee bit of life in the post-match interview. And you know, it's funny, like I saw somebody tweeting me that we were sycophants and not journalists because we were laughed at them, like, but it was just like, geez, you've stood in enough huddles for the last 20 years where there was zero crack to be had. And when you get somebody that, you know, when you get somebody who wants to open up, you nearly have to stand out of their way. Yeah. Let them open up a wee bit and let them be that personality, because the worst thing you do is shut it down and ask them about what about that kick out in the 13th minute.
You're the man. You're the man.
But back to the point of promoting the games, you know, and the GPA will want more players out there because that's who they represent. But, you know, Jim McGuinness, Kieran McGeeney are big characters, and they do like, you know, putting their view out there. You can influence, you know, referees, you can influence opposition with what you say, you know, and it does go way back quarter of a century or more. You know, Mickey Hart with Tyrone was like that, Joe Kernan with Armagh, you know, the late Eamon Coleman was brilliant to speak to with Derry. So, you know, the GPA has a bit of work to do to get more players out there, because the managers are the ones that, you know, will talk, even that's more limited, but, you know, they get a lot of exposure out there, so they want to get more players into the limelight as well.
It's tough. I can understand why players don't want to do it. We've had blue tick days, like where you're texting players and no response, or players saying no, sorry, I can't, I'm working, and it's like 7 o'clock on a Tuesday and it's like, what are you working at, kind of thing. But you can totally understand why.
You give me a 6 that match, you know.
It's not even that. I don't think they're generally that bothered about that sort of stuff. It is literally just not wanting to be the individual who's front and center, and then if you're the only one doing it, then you become the headline for the entire week. Like Kieran McGeeney's piggery comment, because there was so little else to talk about, it literally becomes a conversation for the full week.
Everybody's asked about it.
And then Jim McGuinness gets asked about it, and then it becomes a conversation for another week. And it's like, if you're interested at all, you become the conversation, and I think people don't want to be the conversation. And that's part of it. And the only solution to that is more and more people talking, more things to talk about, and less then sort of drill down focus on one person or one comment or one headline. That's it.
Okay, that wraps up another Monday Club. Thank you very much to Cahair O'Kane and Kenny Archer. And also thank you to our sponsor, Find Insurance NI, your local commercial insurance broker. Remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen or watch. And we will be back next week for another episode.